Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're reading with Barbara Henning today, one of our wonderful instructors. Barbara was born in Detroit in 1948, and then she moved to New York City with her two children in 1983. After a few interim years in Tucson and Mysore, India, she returned to New York, presently living in Brooklyn. She is a poet who also writes prose. Her most recent book is a hybrid biography of her mother, Fern, A Detroit Story by Spoyton Doyville. She has four novels, Just Like That, Black Lace, You, Me, and the Insects, and 30 Miles to Rosebud. She has 8 full-length collections of poetry, Digigram, A Day Like Today, A Swift Passage, Cities in Memory, My Autobiography, Detective Sentences, Love Makes Thinking Dark, and Smoking in the Twilight Bar. And she has numerous chapbooks. She is also the editor of the selected prose of Bobby Louise Hawkins and Looking Up Harriet Mullen. Finally, Barb is the author of the text prompt book, Experiments for Writing Poetry and Fiction. It seems like most people here have taken a class with Barb at one point or another. I'm in a class with her right now, so we all know how much of a gifted teacher and gifted writer she is. I will leave the floor to you, Barb.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for coming. It's great to be here and see you on the screen this afternoon. But I'm going to read from a new project that I've been working on, and a couple of you have already heard some of these poems. So there will be some new ones that you have not heard at the very end for sure. But most of you haven't. And I'm going to read 15 prose poems or flash portraits, whatever you want to call them. I've been calling it Girlfriend. It's about my girlfriends to start with from childhood on. But also I'm going to be including mentors and literary characters and authors who, were very important to me as I was growing up and into my older age. Anyhow, so I'm going to start. I'm going to read 15 and the beginning half of early childhood. So Dot and me, we walked to Grand Junior High School together. Our houses were squat with unkempt yards inside chain link fences. Both houses with a gang of kids inside running wild. Tall and short, Barb and Dot, middle school hoodlums in mind only, with black short boots and tight skirts. I stole pantyhose from the dime store. You had an allowance. Huddled together in your bedroom, we stitched up the seams of my skirt, turned me into someone else. Soft brown hair, now a wild nest smoothed over with hairspray. Thick black eyeliner, 2 motherless girls. Mine died under an oxygen tent, yours in the basement when a camp stove exploded. Stepmothers soon to arrive, 13 years old and arm in arm, preparing each other for the day ahead. When we walked down 9 Mile Road, it was touch me, but then don't dare touch me. Cinderella. It wasn't your fault. You didn't invent the story that led me to believe that I too might be saved by a miracle. I wasn't as kind, meek, or as beautiful as you. Instead, I was a fighter. I fought with my stepmother, and my sisters were not my stepsisters. They were just like me. I did sleep in an attic room like you, and so did my sisters, and we wore old clothes, hand-me-downs, not rags like yours. I would talk to my mother and pray to her, but no miracles, no magic birds, no golden shoes. The story of being saved by a prince, however, was a problem. I remember my mother saying, when you grow up, dear, you will have plenty of love and kisses. She meant a husband, and I went for the plenty. Huddled up in the bed in the attic by the hallway light, I read book after book, discovering utterly different worlds. But the problem was how to get away, run away. One day, a good-looking James Dean with a tendency toward petty crime came along in his souped-up car, and then another and another. But now I'm here with my words, my body, and a big old oak tree swaying in the wind. You, however, remain forever on the last page of many books, miraculously beautiful, sitting by the side of your prince. Good girl. You were a curiosity to me, the girl my mother wanted me to be. Get your Bible badge, follow the Girl Scout laws, be loyal, helpful, a good friend to Girl Scouts and animals, obedient, thrifty, cheerful, clean in thought, word, and deed. And you were all that. Some afternoons I'd do my algebra homework with you. Once you took me to youth night at the Baptist church. When the preacher started calling everyone forward, all the teenagers were crying and gathering on stage. I sat there alone in the pew, aware of the empty space around me. I'm a Lutheran, I whispered. You kneeled and then the men took you into the back room. Your older sister wasn't there. She was on a bus to visit Elvis Presley's house. Sometimes when you and I were walking home together, I'd secretly gloat over your uncool ignorance. You must have known. Once when we were students at the university, we passed on Cass Avenue, stopped to say hello. Then I never saw you again. Never knew how you lived the transformations of the late 60s and 70s, but I imagine you living a careful life. Then again, maybe I'm wrong. 1964. When I first met you, you were living with your grandmother on 9 Mile Road in an old farmhouse still standing in a neighborhood of 1950 cinder block houses. You weren't allowed guests. I'd see the shadowy figure of your grandmother behind the door watching you and calling your name. Come inside, Eileen. You were slim, the lines in your face and body very noir. You had long, dark brown hair and a long, elegant nose, olive skin, dark black eyeliner. You didn't do well in school. You smoked and worked at White Castle. No photo of you in the yearbook. You appeared in the East Detroit High in the 11th grade. Your parents had run away in 2 different directions, leaving you behind. I'd wait for you in front of your house and then we'd walk to school together. Quite often we'd skip school and sit in Henry's drugstore, smoking together and talking about our missing parents, perhaps our boyfriends, our hair. I visited you once after graduation. You were living with a guy, some secret there, perhaps an abusive relationship. The color orange comes to mind. Maybe that was the color of the vinyl sofa in your apartment. The ceilings were low. The bedroom door was closed. It was dark, impenetrable, the despair. And then I never saw you again. But sometime later, I invented an imaginary world in a novel, and you were at the center, intertwined with my double. Catherine, you were raised in an isolated part of northern England with little chance of seeing others, except those in one nearby household. You lost your mother early in life, and your stepbrother Heathcliff was a motherless child too. Neither of you were loved as children. For many, me included, this love beyond the grave between you and Heathcliff was an answer to absence, a deep, dangerous heart connection, like a return to the womb. I am Heathcliff, you said. You died in childbirth, leaving your daughter Kathy, also motherless. Kathy had an advantage. Unlike her mother, she was loved by her father and her housekeeper, even though for a while she was a subject of Heathcliff's cruelty. After he dies, she boards up at gloomy Wuthering Heights and marries her cousin. What a relief to have a happy ending, to return to the possibility of quiet love, even in a fiction. I used to dream about you in the moors, the craggy hills and storms, your losses reminding me of my own vulnerability to the winds of circumstance. There was no wilderness where I lived in Michigan, but sometimes howling winds rattled the windows, tore shingles off the roof, and knocked down electric wires. Frightened, I could always call out to my sisters in the next room. Even though your creator, Emily, was motherless and died young, how lucky she was to have her sisters. 6 sisters for Janet. Your mother, you, and your 6 sisters moved into the rundown house a block away from us. We would take the bus together to and from school. You started your senior year late, transferred in from somewhere else, a black coat wrapped around your thin body. We huddled in a corner in the attic in your house, smoking. Your mother was passed out on the couch. She drinks, you said, rolling your eyes. Little girls in every room. You bleached my hair platinum to my father's dismay. Our favorite spot was a bowling alley, cussing out the waitress for trying to tell us what to do. How old are you girls? Got to be 18 to smoke in here. Your father would show up once in a while in a big car wearing a fancy suit. He'd leave the girls a box of candy. The drive-ins, you in the front seat with your boyfriend Jim, I'm in the back with Peasy. The lighted screen over the parking lot, catching it now and again from a horizontal position. At 5 to 11, my father was waiting at the door with a list of questions about the movie. What could he do? Nothing. I was on my way out. Your last name. You had a mother and a father and a quiet home life. When I pick you up, Sharon, you'd wave to your mother standing in the doorway, a short, stout woman with big arms like my grandmother. We'd glide in and out of the drive-ins talking to the boys. Your mother wasn't angry when you came home late. I think you talked to her about everything. Your life was curious to me, safe in a way. After I ran away from home, you had a job in a bank on Gratiot Avenue, and you would pass phone money to my little sister so she could call me. I went out with your brother a few times. We made out, and then I don't know why, but I kept going out with someone else at the same time, even though I really liked him, and I've thought about him often. He went to Vietnam. I don't even know if he came back. You followed your boyfriend, married him, living in military housing in Kentucky. We talked on the phone a couple times, wrote a few letters, but I never saw you again, and I couldn't find you later because I didn't know your married name. Even with Facebook, these people have disappeared. A gleam in her eye. When I first met you, you were 18 years old with long brown hair, married at 14. You already had 4 children. Your husband was a construction worker. He ordered you around like his servant. Kathy, get me a beer, do this, do that. I remember sitting in the kitchen on Manistee when you used a big thick needle and a chunk of ice to pierce my ears. Close your eyes, you said, as you initiated me into womanhood. Some years later at an ethnic festival, I was selling lemonade in a concession on the waterfront. Spooky Armenian music was broadcasting over the loudspeakers, and only a few people on the midway. In the middle of the afternoon, the clouds were dark, and suddenly you appeared, walking along with a bag of books. You had just started law school, you said, with a gleam in your eye. You had left your husband and your mother was watching the children. I'm jumping ahead now into more adult, sort of adult. Sally at Cobb's. In 72, I would sit at the bar in Cobb's with my book and my short beer and watch you and Alan bartending. Married to the drummer in Shadowfax, you became pregnant shortly after me. You cooked for our toddlers in Monteith Nursery, and every day you pulled their lunch to school in a wagon, along with your little girl, Esther. When Alan and I broke up, I was distraught. You came over and cleaned my apartment. In the early 80s, you moved to the East Village, living in a 3rd floor walk-up floor through with a police lock on the door and an extra mattress in the hallway room. I stayed with you for a few weeks while looking for an apartment and a job. You helped me turn an old Brooklyn tire shop into Alan's copycat painting and building walls, a sleeping loft and counters. The ceiling is still dark green. We painted it, although now it's an Italian grocery. You watched our dog Dorothy for a while when I was in India. With endless creative energy, you made art, abstract city paintings inside and out, collages, toy soldiers on old turntables, and so on. You built stage scenery, designed clothes and hats, sold them in the street markets, opened a store, worked in the schools, taught children how to sew and make art, and planted vegetables and ran events in the Avenue B garden and more. We worked together to start Long News. For years, every Thanksgiving, I'd head over to your place for a potluck. On my fridge, there's a button I bought at Santos made by you. Whenever I open the fridge, I think of you, Sally. Welcome to Manhattan. Tiny Sparrow. I remember your home, the spectacular vegetable garden, the tree swing, all the children you watched, mine included. Your grown daughter's face carries a slight imprint of yours, but her body's strong, her movements confident. You were there for your children, Karen, raising them to be strong and healthy, but while making nutritious food, you were unable to stop smoking. Today, as I glance into the living room, my eye stops at a couch with a blanket. I ask your daughter if she knows what happened here. Everyone else was upstairs, I say, sleeping, but she was down here on the couch and the man raped her. I whisper, your child weeps and wails. She never told me, she never said so. Maybe I'm wrong, I do that sometimes, collapse my own experience with another. But at night when I close my eyes, I hear your voice telling me, he put a pillow over my face, he hurt me. One of the last times I saw you, someone snapped a photo of you and me under the sign from the Twilight Bar. When our children were small, we imagined living together in old age in a communal house. But I was in New York, you in Detroit, and as the years passed, we stopped calling. Now I hear your deep throaty laugh. In my mind's eye, your willowy body is like a star on a summer morn, and you're in your yard sitting under that old cherry tree, surrounded by a group of little children who loved you, and you loved them too. That was some lines from a song Aretha Franklin was singing. Tiny Sparrow, beautiful song. A clover plank. When I was a child, we read your poems for children, a celebration of the train, lapping up the miles, that type of thing. I didn't realize that some of your poems could be so dark, written to the rhythm of the hymns we would sing in church. As an adult, I found your unedited poetic voice beyond chilling awe, stuttering awe. With a scratchy cough damaged voice, I once sang your poem for my students. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. As if a stanza of amazing grace. A Brooklyn gospel singer picked up where I left off. Today it's fall and the leaves scatter. Awake, I think of winter coming, how the earth has a span of life too, a beginning and an end. Me here in this bed, so small on this planet that's spinning along on its own course. All of us part of the immense distance. A friend lies down this morning under a scalpel. The driver, the chariot, the horses gallop forward. Ding, ding, an email, Kay's in recovery, doing well. We gather in your garden, in your poem with you, Emily, studying a bee on a clover plank. Just as a crack opens in our view, the bee is swept away with the wind, and without a moment to spare, we are close behind. Treetops. At Birdcliff in 91, you were studying the trees, drawing on white folded Japanese paper. And under the wild trees and in the wind while watching you draw, I wrote a series of collage sonnets. In the middle of the cavernous Catskills, we took off our clothes and hopped around on the stones in the river, taking photographs of each other, reclining, standing. And you made the photos into two collages, each like a hand of cards. You carefully removed a fan-shaped mushroom from a tree in the forest, then etched a tiny tree branch on its side and gave it to me. In Provincetown, I came to visit you at your cottage, showered on the porch, swam and walked along the shore, reading Moby Dick and writing poetry. When Alan died, I came to you in grief. When you were in the hospital, I helped you shower and washed your hair. One summer, I stayed in your apartment on Fulton Street. I loved sharing your relationship with space, every view and artwork. Even the table setting brought a sense of quiet and peace, a way of distracting the losses we encounter in life. I watched you working day by day and brought some of your discipline and sensibility into my own life and art. After you married, you were often in New Hampshire. I was in India and out west, and we rarely saw each other. But I remember once sitting with you outside Cafe Orland while we watched the pouring rain gush over the awning onto the sidewalk and street. Spanglish. You were an artist, I was a writer. We met at the Cavalry Inn on a dirt road in the heart of Mysore. After morning yoga, cross-legged on the floor in front of the Ashtanga guru, Patabi Joyce, we rolled our eyes as he asked for chocolate and American money. You spoke Spanish, but I knew some English. I spoke a little Spanish. We cafed in the Indian restaurants, eating idli and curry while pretending we were in Paris. You had married a Frenchman once and lived in Paris as a dancer. I had just broken up with a philosopher who loved everything French. Beautiful, and you could walk right into the most frightening Indian traffic, and the vehicles and cows would weave around you. You made a sculpture in the courtyard with Indian artists who were carving statues of Hindu gods. In Puerto Vallarta, I visited you with twice, and we swam with the crabs, went to your art openings, traveled with your boyfriend into the countryside, and fasted on black grapes. I took your yoga classes and wrote about you in a photo poem pamphlet. Maybe you didn't like it. A poetic word collage can make for misunderstanding. After I moved to Tucson on Christmas Eve, you called me from your parents' house in Nogales. You wanted to talk, and I wanted to call you back when I was home, but I couldn't get a line through. For 2 days, I couldn't get through, and then you were gone. Too many people calling from Tucson to Mexico on Christmas. Perhaps you thought I was dissing you, inadvertently offensive. A translator needed, many translators, no response, tangled lines, and so we lost each other. I have 2 more. Miranda. When you moved from Detroit to New York City, you volunteered to help me with long news. You were tall and thin with red hair. You became the art editor for 4 issues. During the week, you worked in a law office and simultaneously made art, taking advantage of the copy machine. We shared an interest in theory and politics, and I learned a lot about conceptual art from you, especially on our weekend visits to the galleries. You made covers for some of my books, a spooky Durg engraving of a devilish guy with a skull coat of arms and wings, tempting a woman with carnal pleasure. In shadow, a woman, isn't that you, photographing a tree with an open book in the branches? In the corridor between your house and your neighbor's dark, blurry figures strolling, me and another over and over. Once you were collecting objects that held guilt, a ritual, a Mother's Day card that Alan had given me after we broke up. I'd behaved badly and thrown it at him or something like that. I've always felt guilty about this. Even after you cut it up and burned it, I still felt guilty. I remember once lying on my bed calling stores and restaurants to try and find a pair of lost glasses while you photographed my belly button for some project. You clipped 999 corners from my books, and I collected a line for each one, making 72 sonnets, my autobiography. A triptych of your bird nests is on my wall. In the mid-90s, I became involved with Ashtanga yoga and you with ninjutsu. You tried to help me with my uncontrollable cough, teaching me some Qigong breathing. You love my dog, Dorothy, and you took a photo of us for the cover of Me and My Dog. You've always been an animal lover. Several lost cats have found home with you. We've both had a lot of losses over the year and a couple of minor fallings out. Even though once in a while we make each other crazy, we work together on many projects. And not long ago, we promised each other to stay friends forever. And this last poem I'm reading for Esther. Okay. In '84, I was working in an affirmative action program, and you were a professor in the English department, an only child from a Jewish family in Boston. Your mother was a hairdresser and your father worked for your uncle's cigar company. You graduated from high school in the late 50s and then went to college. 10 years behind you, I grew up in a Midwestern working class Protestant family. Neither of us were religious. You defended me when I was attacked in a tenure review for my non-traditional degree. Pretty regularly, we'd meet at Cafe Orlin in the East Village, halfway between my apartment and yours. You encouraged me to love Dee and then later to leave him. He thought we had something sexual going on because you were a lesbian and we cared about each other. I laughed. We can be friends too, you know. Even when I was living in Tucson, we talked on the phone most nights, promising to be there for each other. When I lost my voice in the lung doctor's office, you met me there. You have been like a sister to me, Esther. Once when you were 70 years old to help an Afghan woman keep her child and escape a frightening husband, you climbed down a ravine, hid in the bushes, and then took her where she could declare asylum and live in safety. You are a true mensch. Besides being a professor, you built a 6-sided house, worked as a carpenter, became an artist, painting expressionist portraits, a filmmaker, and a social activist, working to help the women in Afghanistan. When COVID hit the city, you caught the first wave and your issues with memory became worse. Now your body is tiny and wrinkled. When you lie straight back on the doctor's table, you get dizzy. I'm so worried, you say. I'm forgetting more and more and I can't remember anything. You used to boldly walk against traffic and into the middle of the intersection, but now I reach out and try, difficult as it might be, to guide you across with the light. Love you, Esther. Thank you. That's it.
I did.
Oh, but it was muted.
Love you too.
Okay. So
All right.
that's all that, but actually there's one more I'd like to read because somebody just walked in, but I have to get it. If you can just wait a second. Or wait for me to find. This is for Jenny Capular. A lady's handkerchief. For years, I came once a week to your class. You wove together your asana instructions with metaphor and allusions to literature, art, and philosophy. When I was traveling as I passed over the Mackinac Bridge, I heard your voice and I sat up straight in the driver's seat. Lift your diaphragm, like delicately lifting a lady's handkerchief on 2 pillars dividing north from south. Even as we bent our bodies around chairs and blocks and hung from ropes, there was always a spiritual stillness in the room. Once, because of a recent breakup, I was in tears, and you looked at me and then said to everyone, yoga is a healing art. It opens up blockages in the body just by doing it. Another time, the elevator was out and you carried my big suitcase up to your studio on the 5th floor. I was huffing and puffing behind you. In an email you once wrote me, people like us with a kyphotic thoracic spine need to move the spinous processes, those stegosaurus-like projections off the back of the vertebrae, move them in and slightly up, and then we experience length and ease. Yesterday, I took your pranayama class on Zoom and you were making mistakes now and again, forgetting this and that. A few months earlier, your collarbone was healing. Now your wrist is injured. Afterwards, you stayed on to talk to me about aging and my tightening knees. You assured me we all get stiff with age. As I said goodbye to you for your vacation, I could feel you moving away from us. One day, long ago, long into the future, I hope, you will say you are not going to teach anymore. And that thought makes me very sad. Jenny, for Jenny. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank
Okay.
you, Barb.
Okay.
These poems are phenomenal. I especially love the poetry from your years growing up in Detroit. Somehow I feel like I was also a teenage girl in the 60s when I hear you read them. But all of those are gorgeous, gorgeous pieces. And I'm curious to know, in writing these poems, you know, you're writing about people in real life, you're writing about fictional characters, you're also writing about authors who have influenced you. I'm curious if you've found anything in common between all these different girlfriends, real and fictional.
I think, I think just that we like to talk a lot with each other, women. We help each other and through life, And I don't know, I can't think of. One thing, I started to do this project because I knew I had been writing most of my life, a lot of my life, not most of it, but focusing on my male partners and lovers, and that I hadn't really focused on my women friends, and they were actually really important to me. And yeah, so they were important. I would say that would be, maybe somebody else knows what would, after you listen to them, and a few people in here have listened to them many times. You could have some observation. We're
Well,
like sisters. It's like I have written some about my sisters, and I realized that there's something really to the to what we always said about sisterhood, you know, very important. So
certainly. One other thing that struck me as very interesting with these pieces is it feels like, in addition to sort of preserving the relationships you've had with these women, there's also a sense of just preserving history. You know, when you're writing about Detroit, you're talking about what avenue you were on, or what drugstore, or where you smoked and whatnot. Or you know, the poems from more recent, you're talking about aging and trying to preserve the body and experiencing these things as they happen. I'm curious what else you want to preserve in these poems, you know, what it is that you're trying to set down on all these pages.
well, I think I probably couldn't have written these until I got older. You know, it's like a memoir is a lens looking back at my life in a memoirish type way, you know. And so, you know, it's I've a couple of them I've written, I've had problems writing them because they were close friends who we ended up having difficulty with each other, and I have to ask myself, why am I doing it? But it, you know, and how to do it without being vindictive and or revengeful or anything, but still to, you know, make sense for myself and come to terms with various things, and maybe to pay tribute to what a lot of my friends have helped me in my life. You know, like I think my girlfriends when I was young, it's odd to look back and see how many of them had lost their mothers and were in very difficult situations, as I was. And we must have looked to each other for help, you know. So I mean, I was thinking about Little Women. I wrote one about Little Women too, and about Beth and Little Women, and how much that affected me reading that when that sister died in that book, and how I remember reading it and how it affected me as a child, right? And now I read it again recently and I cried again when she died. I thought, well, maybe some of these things that we read helped us also get through our lives, you know. So I don't know if I answered your question.
I think it does. And you know, I'm really glad I'm taking Barb's prose poetry class right now, and I'm really glad that I'm taking it at the time that I'm participating in this reading, because we just finished the lecture on epiphanies, and so many of your poems, Barb, do have this sense of epiphany, you know, this sense of discovery. And I think maybe you're even answering the question of like, why am I writing this person as you're writing it? You know, that's the epiphany of what it is that you want to set down. So, you know, in addition to epiphanies, and, you know, your lecture talks a lot about James Joyce, I'm curious to know what other influences, literary or otherwise, are sort of informing this project as you're writing it.
Well, I hadn't thought about that. I should ask you what the questions were you were going to ask me. That informed it. I don't know, everything, I suppose. You know, everything I've ever read probably or written coming into it. I always wanted to write something that was all very small pieces that fit together. I think I've done that before too, but this is just different. I can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
No, fair enough.
Okay.
I see a lot of the influences in this work. I mean, I certainly saw Emily Dickinson in your Emily Dickinson poem, and Kimberly said in the chat that that poem really is sublime, and I completely agree.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I'm thinking about people that I'm going to write about. I can tell you that.
hmm.
You know, I have a list of possible people I'm reading Virginia Woolf to the Lighthouse right now, thinking of, because I loved that book so much and there was something when I was in college, I read it, and it just gave me this whole different idea about writing and what you could do with writing, the way one one consciousness melds into the next.
I wanted to ask you about that. I wondered if, obviously you're writing these poems all from your perspective, but I'm curious if you find the voices of the women you're writing about bleeding into the poems.
Well, it feels like one long girlfriend, you know, that almost like they're all related, we're all related to each other.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, I'm sure their voices are somewhat, because but I'm not going to take their voice. I'm speaking to them. I did a class at the Poets House a couple of years ago. It was right before COVID, and it was on portraits, dedications, and something else I had in there. And really, I hadn't done much of that, but I read a bunch of people who I loved their work, and that probably, and then I taught that course, and everybody was writing these portraits and dedications. And that probably was waiting to be born here, so.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder also if that ties back to what you were just saying about like sisterhood and women sort of supporting each other and informing one another, particularly since you notice the threat of a lot of the people having lost their mothers in the poems that you wrote.
In the young poems, yeah.
Yeah, in the young poems.
And the literature, I mean, too, so.
Yeah. Because there are a lot of people on this Zoom call, I'll ask one more question for now, and then I'll open it up to anyone in the audience who has questions. Obviously you're in the middle of writing this project, so what the finished product looks like might, be years from now, but I'm curious if you've given any thought towards how you plan to organize these pieces, as you put them into a collection.
Yeah, right now I'm trying to do it almost in the order of meeting the people, but then some of the friends as adults are still friends, and and the friendship extended beyond. So I'm not sure. I might keep it like this, or I might divide it into categories of some sort. I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
I look forward to
thought about it all.
I look forward to reading all of them when they're all written.
Okay, great. Thank you for asking me to do this, by the way.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Really, I had the luxury of listening to Barb read some of these in Brooklyn in, I think, August. So having heard, the poems that I haven't heard yet, I'm so excited for all of this. I want to open it up to everyone in the audience to, ask questions or say whatever you'd like. Feel free to actually unmute yourself. You can also put a question in the chat. If there's a lot of people talking at once, I just ask that you raise your hand so we're not all speaking over each other. But whoever wants to lead, take it away.
I have a question for Barb, having to do with your use of the second person. And I was just wondering if there are any other any of these sketches or persona poems written in the first person, or if the whole thing is just going to be in the second person. I really loved that.
Right now, they're all in the second person. I even have a list of, I have some that I was calling short stops that were like, and people that were important to me, they did something with me or whatever that they come to mind, but I don't remember much about them. And even those I was doing in the U. Yeah, I've thought about it, but I kind of like that because it's more like a dialogue. And say if it was in the third person, I'd be like representing the person more than filtering it through my consciousness, right? It seems more honest to me in a way to do it this way. And plus it opened up something. I've tried some of them that way. It opened up an actual intimacy between me and the person I'm speaking with. And it made me feel more responsible for what I was saying.
Yeah, like a letter. Yeah.
in a way. Do you see what I mean? Because it
Yeah,
was-
absolutely. Like a letter. Yeah, like a letter to someone.
yeah,
addressed
it's like
to
a
me.
letter to someone. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Thank you.
Jim? Jim? Jim Feast?
He might have to unmute.
You gotta unmute, Jim. We can't hear you.
No, I'm trying to figure out how to do it. Oh, I don't know if people know this piece, a sketch of the past, I think it's called, by Wolf, and it's like very disturbing to me. Because she says, I'm going to present a bunch of reminiscences unconnected, like I was on a train, then in the middle, like, then my cousin molested me, but she doesn't comment on it, which seems kind of odd. It's sort of like it changes the whole complexion of the piece, but you're without that type of material, but some of your pieces to me have that same thing, like what is going on, but they just pass over, like you go like, and she was a good friend when I ran away from home, but like, what is that? Unless I think people have read other things, pieces by you may know more about it, but this does kind of come out like a dramatic thing right in the middle of a kind of a more mundane presentation.
Yeah, well, that sounds like an interesting, by Virginia Woolf. A sketch. from
Yeah.
that? Okay, I'm gonna read that. Well, I'm just picking and choosing. I actually have 30 of these, so they kind of build and they depend on each other. So I'm trying not to repeat a lot of the same stuff. So you might have picked up on something already, but I do like the kind of idea anyhow of a little shocking thing in the middle of something, because it's written to the person I'm speaking to. They know what it's about, and you're just overhearing our conversation in a way. Although I'm writing it, knowing you're overhearing the conversation, right? So the address that I'm making. Okay, Kim.
Hi, Barbara. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to offer appreciation for this sequence. I've heard some of these before, but I think sometimes in situations where I was personally tense or anticipatory and I didn't take it in, and I really heard them this time. And they're just like a great concision in the writing, and as our host said, I felt like I was a little girl growing up in the 60s too. I kind of hope that you keep to your chronological framework. The rhythm of that just feels very organic, and that somehow that works. And the other thing I wanted to observe was that what I noticed in this hearing was how when nature comes in, rain and leaves, there's often a sense of kind of movement and verticality and diminishment, and it really speaks to time, the passage of time, sort of moving through in a very subtle kind of way.
Those things you remember. Yeah, when I read them before with you, once you were running a salon, and the other time you were reading, so I had it with me.
Yeah.
Kim is a
So
poet also, some of you know.
I could lay back and listen, but I was really struck by when nature comes in, often, not always, but when it comes into this, there is that sense of movement, and I think it's a figuration for time, passage of time. Very subtle. Thank you, Barbara. So wonderful.
Thanks. Anyone else have anything? Question, comment?
I'm
Yes.
curious about something that was raised when Jim spoke, which is you said that like you are writing these pieces to the person, but with with in mind that there's going to be an audience. Does that change the way that you write these pieces, or is that something happening unconsciously?
Listen, I've been writing for a long time, so I'm always even if I'm conscious of a reader, I think you do. If you're a writer and you keep writing, you're just conscious of it, and it affects the way you do your sentences, everything. Yeah, totally. I'm totally conscious. I might be in moments not conscious of it because I'll go into some zone. But then when I'm revising, I'm definitely conscious of it. Yeah. Yeah. Carla, you had some. Oh, you're muted, Carla.
Yeah, just an observation. I don't know if you agree with it. I like very much the sequence and the idea of revisiting past relationships, especially with your girlfriends. I also felt while you were reading a sense of loss. So a relationship that maybe could have developed in some way, but it didn't. And I like very much this idea, this perspective of opening to something that maybe didn't happen, but could have happened. And I think it's very intriguing and stimulating.
Yeah. I think that in our time now, young, especially the childhood poems, but even going on, I moved around a lot in my life. I read for someplace in California last week with another reader, and she asked, boy, you had a lot of girlfriends, you know? And I thought, well, I did reinvent my life many times, and I moved around, and that's just how it goes when you do that. And I didn't get married and stay with someone my entire life. So I was kind of on a journey, you know, and you meet people and you lose people. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but there is a sense that we come together and then we're apart, even if we have a long friendship, you know, that'll happen, right? So. Yes, Jennifer?
Yeah, for some weird reason, I can't find my hand app. So
Yeah, that's okay. I look for this one.
thank you for the reading. It was really beautiful to hear. And one thing that I really admire about both your writing and your teaching is how you blur the line between poetry and prose. And I'm wondering if you feel like your own work has always had this quality, or if there was a point in your writing history where this became more of an intentional practice for you.
Well, I think I didn't have a lot of experience with poetry when I was growing up, except for the poems that would be in, you know, little childcraft books. And then in high school, in the 10th grade, I discovered haiku. So, and haiku are like little stories too, of the very brief instant in time, right? But I read lots and lots of novels growing up. Victorian novels, all of Dickens, etc. And yeah, and so I have a feeling for prose that's with me, but then I started writing poetry. I don't know when, as an adult, except for those haiku that the teacher gave me so much attention for in 10th grade, my haiku about the leaves falling and whatever. And but when I was writing Smoking in the Twilight Bar for my master's thesis at Wayne State University, I wasn't writing it for that, but I ended up using it for that. And those poems I wrote in lines and back and forth to prose, to lines, to prose, to lines, and prose. And so I just discovered this feeling for that through those pieces. And then, you know, in living in New York, you know, I was just around a lot of poets who do experiment with form and think of writing not in the genre, but as writing, you know, and you can do all kinds of things with it. So, and onward like that. But I do like the prose poem form. But I also like line forms. They have a different feeling. There's a kind of hesitation, a kind of a highlighting in the lined form of poems. Of something, and so you're and anyhow, both are good.
Thank you.
Have you taken my classes before, Jennifer? Because I don't know.
No, I haven't, but I'm definitely considering taking one coming up, and time has prevented me from doing it before now. So that's why I was glad to
remember.
Have this
I always
reading.
have a waiting. Lately, I've had a waiting list, so you don't wait to the last
Too
minute.
soon. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Tyrone? Are you there? Hi, Tyrone.
Hey, Barbara.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. He's my office. Tyrone was my office mate at Wayne State University in grad school. We're like long friendship.
Yep. Long time.
Okay, you're going to Buffalo soon, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'll call you. Okay. Michael?
Yeah, it was really lovely to hear you read. Did you find it cathartic to do these and put them together? There's a sense of loss. There's this wonderful sense of registering your history, but I also felt very cleansed by this collection. I wondered what it felt like for you.
Yeah, I love writing them. They come very easily, but that's, and they're not labored over. I mean, I do rewrite. I'm a big revisionist, so I rewrite and rethink things often, you know, but yeah. But there's something I used to like have to try harder to write. But then what I learned over time is if I just sat down and started doing it, whatever it is, it just comes, you know, and these are coming through not, you know, like in Digigram, I did a lot of research for the poems, and they went from journal to research and collaging and stuff, you know, time consuming work that, but these are, yeah, these are cathartic. I guess I could use that term. So
That was the other impression I got, because I've read your digigrams, and it seems like there's a lot of stuff that goes into them. But this is almost, I guess, like a lot of things, almost effortless isn't quite the right word, but it seems like it comes easier. There's a flow to it. I don't know. Anyway, it was very enjoyable. Thank you.
Digigram is interrupted. It's interrupted. You know, it's purposefully as part of the form. It's interrupted. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, thank you.
These are more straightforward and less. They're collage too, because you'll notice that they're not all in time order, and some of them more so than others, and some of them become very direct, time oriented too. I don't know. Well, whatever I want to do, I feel like at 74 I should do whatever I want to do. Okay. I'm doing it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think that, you know, they paint a portrait of you in your childhood, and I would love to see a photograph of you with the bleach blonde hair and these outfits
I'll show you, definitely.
that you describe. It's just a whole different vision of you than what I see now. Child of the 50s.
I even bleached my hair blonde after my children were grown. When was that? Kim probably remembers me bleaching my hair. I know Esther remembers it. So yeah, so that's not, but it was a more punky bleached blonde then. So yeah, I'll definitely show you some photos.
Good. Do you have all the outfits, you know, with the tight skirts and the heels and the...
I don't have all those around with me still. I moved all over the country and to India. I have them in my head. So anybody else? Great. Thank you everyone for coming to coming to this reading. Fatima, what did you think? I can ask her. She was my student.
Yeah, I really enjoyed everything. I didn't really have a question or anything, but yeah, I just really appreciate the fact that you took the time to focus on friendships. I definitely think it's a topic that's not really explored in writing. Like you said, it's like, well, you focus mostly on your lovers and stuff, but yeah, it was really refreshing to hear everything. And of course, I love the Esther poem very much, of course. But yeah, it was beautiful. I loved every piece.
Yeah, Fatima is a really good writer too. We worked together in a couple classes and on her thesis. So, okay.
Barb, do you think all of these poems will be prose poems, or will you make some of these lined? You're not sure?
Oh no. Maybe I'll go back and change some of them to be lined. Maybe I'll rearrange them and put them in a word blender. I don't know. No, these are pretty much going to stay the way they are. So.
Okay.
Jennifer?
I've found this very inspiring. My personal feeling is when I write vignettes about my life, I think no one's ever going to want to hear these. But when I hear you reading yours, they're so relatable. They're so lovely to listen to. It gives me some hope that someday somebody might listen to mine as well.
Just be conscious that you're writing about your time, and you have a little witness to yourself as you're writing. And if you can do that a little bit, with the writing to make it, then it'll be available for other people. So
Thank you.
thank you for coming.
Are there
Okay,
any other questions for Barb?
all right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Barb, thank you so much for doing this. For those of you interested, Barb has a session of her prose poetry class with writers.com on January 18th. And then her flash fiction course with writers.com is on March 23rd, I believe.
I think the prose poetry one is almost full.
It's
Right.
getting there. So sign up now. Don't delay.
All right.
Ask
Thank
someone to get it for you for Christmas. Barb, thank you so much for running this. These
Sure.
poems were phenomenal. I look forward to reading many, many more of them.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Thanks for running it. Stay on. Will you stay on, Sean?
Absolutely.
For a minute, yeah, but to talk to me because I want to read the chat and I didn't have time to read it yet.
Yeah, I'll certainly stay on. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. Have a lovely rest of your weekend. And I hope to see you on more of these soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.